We listen very, very closely to what our customers are asking for. We're observing how they're playing our games, and then we try to meet them where they're asking for novelty and innovation. We've tried different business models over the year, and that's the other thing that's very dynamic about the industry is the business models shift and change.
Welcome to Decision Points. I'm Doug Hudson.
I'm Scott Wood.
Here's my brother from another mother, Patrick Hudson, CEO of Robot Entertainment.
We do need to trace the family tree.
Yes, we do. Where are you from?
I didn't even think about that until just now.
Where are you from?
I'm from here, grew up, born and raised in the Dallas area.
I'm not. Supposedly, we've got some roots early on into the Carolinas, and then I was raised in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Yeah, I don't think we have anybody that far out east.
Supposedly, somebody said that I don't know if this would be true. I don't know how far. I haven't done a lot of study. That the name was originally spelled H-U-T. Have you ever heard anything like that?
Well, you occasionally see it spelled that way,
Correct.
But not often. But I don't know I didn't know the origin of it. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's back up then. You're from Dallas.
From Dallas, yeah. Born in Irving.
Come on.
Lived there till I was about 7, and then made my way up to small Coppell, Texas, which is less small than it used to be.
Wow, you watched Coppell blow up.
I know, right? When I got there, I think there were 3,000 people. Now it's probably saturated because it's not a big piece of land.
Yeah.
So it was a tiny 2A school when I got there, and now it's a 6A behemoth, and they're way better at football than we were back then.
Yeah, and our middle daughter played a lot of lacrosse, and they had a very good lacrosse team as well.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. So, well, tell me about growing up. What were you into?
You know, I grew up with a great group of friends, a great family, great parents, sister who's still here local. I'm still really close with a bunch of people that I grew up with.
That's cool.
So probably once a quarter, buddies and I get together for beers, and guys that I've known since second grade, third grade.
So where y'all like to go hang out? Where are the go-to spots?
Well, we're kind of spread around the Metroplex, so we try to get as central as we can, and that's not easy. Everybody's driving a bit. So
I'm going to stay here till you give me a name. What's a bar? Where y'all headed to?
A good spot we like is we're usually up kind of where Plano meets Frisco. Seems to be kind of the center of gravity. Yeah. And there's a good bar restaurant up there called Union Bear.
Okay.
They brew their own beers and stuff, and it's a pretty good spot to meet.
All right.
Yeah.
Union Bear.
Yeah. High school at Coppell when it was growing a lot. Was a football player, played a lot of sports. Probably football was my best sport.
What'd you play?
I was a linebacker.
Come on.
And that was back then I felt like I wanted to keep playing football.
Yeah.
And so I went and played in college for 1 year out west. I wanted to get out kind of into the mountains and into nature and ski at the same time. So I went to this small school. It was 1AA back before you had the FBS, FCS.
I went to Furman. Furman was 1AA.
Furman, yeah. Okay, so this was called Southern Utah University. So I went.
What town is that in?
It's in Cedar City, which is kind of southwest Utah. Beautiful, right? So you're not far from Zion and Bryce Canyon.
Oh my gosh!
And for that it was great. A little smaller than I wanted, and I quickly realized that I didn't really want to play football. Well, I did, but I realized
there were 12 people in the stands and it was still a lot of work.
It wasn't so much that. So I'm a linebacker freshman, so you're meat squad, right?
Yeah.
So the guy across from me, the right tackle, his last name was Bostic, and at the time there were, I think, 2 offensive linemen that were his brothers or cousins that are Bostics in the NFL at the time. They're all pros, and so he was being scouted for the pros as well. So that's who I was going up against.
You were a tackling dummy.
And I went from, 3A, 4A Coppell High School to that, and, realizing going back to the dorm room every night with a pounding headache, from getting my head bashed in all day. I was like, this
Dude, he was really sad when you quit.
Yeah, probably. So I just realized this was not the future for me.
Yeah.
And I probably should get serious about, academics. And, I gave that up after only 1 semester out there. Great experience. I kind of loved being out there, but it was time to kind of move on.
You probably
and give up the dream.
You didn't get to enjoy any of the, the Zion or Bryce Canyon or any
a little
of that.
bit. We got up and we skied, and we'd get up into the mountains. You can just drive right out of that town and be in the most beautiful mountains.
Wow.
There's a
Yeah.
place there called Cedar Breaks National Monument. It's a 30-minute drive, and it's just stunning.
Cool.
It's one of the prettiest places in the country, I think. So, but it was time to get back here.
Yeah.
And most of those buddies that I was telling you about that I grew up with, they were all at Texas A&M, is
Okay.
where they'd all gone. So I kind of made my decision based on that. I was like, I'm going to go where my buddies are,
Yep.
and transfer to Texas A&M.
After one semester. So
After
in
a
the
semester,
spring
I
of
ended up in
freshman
the
year.
spring. I ended up back here
Yeah.
because I made the decision too late.
Yeah.
To kind of get into Texas A&M. So I came back here. I did a semester at North Texas. I worked at UPS loading trucks at night, to pay the bills, and then off I went to College Station.
There you go.
Yeah, Cedars, College Station, they were really equally kind of pretty.
I certainly gave up a lot in the scenery department.
You
I
chose
gained
relationships over the scenery.
I gained a lot in the university and the academic potential and being around my buddies, but yeah, I definitely missed the mountains for sure.
So what'd you end up studying then?
Well,
at
it
A&M?
took me a long time to figure that out.
It did,
I was curious. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I was pre-med for a while, and then organic chemistry changed those ideas. And then I was engineering for a while, and, advanced calculus changed those ideas. And I made my way into finance. So I was a finance major.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your family.
So been married for 24 years.
What's her name? Where'd y'all meet?
Yeah, her name is Andrea,
Okay.
and we met here in the Dallas area, and we have twins. We have boy-girl twins that are 21 now, about to be 22, and they are both wrapping up college in December. They both zipped their way through it, 3.5 years for both of them,
Wow.
which I was on the 5-year plan.
Yeah.
And if
they
I
made
could-
up for you.
If I could go back and do it again, I would take the 6-year plan, and I encouraged them to enjoy it. But they're ready to just get through it and move on with
It's
life.
nice to have the efficiency of 3.5 years, but you got 2 of them at the same time.
Two of 'em
So
at the same
You don't really
time.
gain a ton of efficiency with yours too.
But I've written my last tuition check.
There you go.
Where'd they go?
So my son is at Oklahoma State. He
Okay.
started down in New Orleans at Loyola.
Yeah.
Was proud of him. He was a kid who's a bit of a late bloomer, and academically kind of came on late. But he just felt like, and he had some really close friends that were kind of going off to colleges together. But he really wanted to go, find himself and do his own thing.
Yep.
He intentionally wanted to go to a college out of Texas where he didn't know anybody.
Yeah.
And I think that ended up being a pretty formative experience for him. But very similar to me, he realized, okay, I don't want to do that anymore.
Yep.
He had a couple of buddies at Oklahoma State, and he followed them up there, and he's had a great experience. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, it's a cool town.
Yeah, and my daughter, she's in Boston. She's at Berklee College of Music. She's an incredibly talented musician. In fact, they were both musicians growing up. He was a drummer. She's a singer and plays guitar, and they were in a band together. They had a band in high school, and so he still plays for fun, plays the bass guitar, plays drums, but he decided that he didn't want to pursue that, but she very much wanted to pursue that
Cool.
as a career. So
Is that from you or your wife?
it's not from either of us from a talent perspective, but we're music lovers. We started taking them to concerts when they were young.
Yeah.
We bought them their first instruments when they were like 10 or 11.
So cool.
They never gravitated towards academics, but we always insisted they find something to be kind of in a team environment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so for them, that became School of Rock, if you know what School of
Yeah.
Rock
Yeah,
is.
no
right?
way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they joined School of Rock Dallas here right by SMU when they were probably 11, and they did that all the way through high school, which became a big part of their social circle, but obviously taught them a
cool.
lot
That's
about,
very cool.
working as a team and accomplishing something together. And she proved to be really, really talented. She's got a fantastic vocal range. She's a great songwriter, good guitarist, and so she's up at Berklee College of Music, which is, if you don't know it, it's one of the best music schools in the world. And
Fantastic.
she's had a great experience. So
Yeah, that's
she's
really
been
cool.
releasing music, so she's gonna. It's hard, a very hard
Yeah.
business to make it in, of course, but she's gonna give it a go.
Does she have a genre that she likes or focuses on? or-
She's varied. She had a band in Boston that did well. It was pop punk, and they were up for Best New Band in Boston last year.
No way.
And had a nice bit of success going, but as young bands do, it fell apart. And she's off now doing her own thing and going to create her first solo album here coming out in the next, I think maybe January.
Cool.
And now she's moving a little bit more into kind of singer-songwriter, blend of pop.
Yep.
Music's changed so much, and from when we were younger, right? Music fit into pretty tightly defined genres, right? When we were young, and you flipped around to your radio station to find your genre, and it just blends so much more now, right? So there's a blending of genres.
Where'd they go to high school?
They went to Parish Episcopal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
I thought
Which was a great arts program
Yes.
as well.
Yeah, I was curious just kind of if
Where
they went, just because if the school supported their music.
And I hadn't thought about. It shows you that I have zero musician.
We know that about you.
Thank you. That bands literally think about team and teamwork.
Yeah.
It's critical.
Oh, yeah.
But as I think about it now, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
I mean, personalities, roles.
When you make the comment about, young bands falling apart because, ego, immaturity, roles, like,
all the
it's hard for a band to stick together when everybody's young and dumb,
Yeah.
and kind of trying to figure it out.
I got an idea for you.
Okay.
I think maybe your daughter has a place for her music to live. You got to figure out how to get it on your video game.
So she and her brother, actually, for one of our video games, maybe 5 years ago, I think, they wrote a song that so usually at the end of a video game, like a movie, the credits roll,
Yeah.
and there's music to the credits. So it's a kind of a safe place to go and for me to kind of pull
Stick it.
executive privilege and let my kids kind of be on the game. So they wrote the credits music to one of our games. Actually, they've done it for 2 games now that I think about it.
Okay, so what royalty are they getting?
No royalty.
Hey, what's their names?
Cole and Claire.
Cole and Claire, call me. I'll be your agent. You should be getting a royalty for this.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
That's all, and how fun for them and for you guys.
It's fun to be a part of that journey, to watch them kind of, obviously grow up, but that musical journey, that creative field, trying to chart a path. It's a joy to be a part of. Stressful and it's tough to make it, but I'm having a blast.
What's your son want to do when he graduates?
So he loves what I do. He loves the industry, and he's a big gamer. Last summer of 23, he got an internship at a game company based in California. So he's a marketing major, and he likes all the creative aspects of marketing. And he ended up being fortunate enough to get this internship where he was doing marketing for this startup, venture-backed startup. They'd never shipped a game, but a decent-sized company, 60 people or so. And they hired him to come into the marketing group, learned a lot that summer. They kept him on, throughout the whole school year last year. And then they kept him on through the summer. And it looks like they're going to kind of bring him on
Great.
once he wraps up school in December.
Very cool.
And keep doing that. And he's loved it, and it's kind of fun being in a small entrepreneurial company, which we'll end up talking more about, but you get to wear a lot of hats.
Yep.
He's came in ostensibly to do the marketing, but he's also had an opportunity to work with the game designers and spend time with them. And so he's had a great experience and, been able to earn a little bit of income while he's in school.
That's great.
Where would he live? Where's the company based?
They're based in Santa Monica,
Okay.
but probably be remote for him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think he'll have to go out there and shoot unless he chooses to.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So they both graduate in May?
They both graduate in December.
In December?
Yeah, so
Oh,
coming
like
up
right here. Yeah.
Yeah, here in
It's here.
I know it's here. It's coming
It's
up.
awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Well done to you and your wife.
Thanks.
All right. So you graduate A&M. What's your early career look like?
Yeah. So there are a couple of maybe, like I said, I charted my way or maybe found my way through what I wanted to study, and it was finance, but I was also really interested in just international business in general. And I ended up, the most formative things I think I did while I was in college was studying abroad in a couple of different places. So I went and lived in Mexico for a few months, lived with a Mexican family. I think that was between my sophomore and junior year. And then I went also down and lived in Costa Rica for a while. And both kind of world-changing opportunities and experiences for me. You know, I grew up in suburban Dallas, and I didn't travel a lot. And I think I was the first person in my family that, you know, ever went to college. And so just didn't have a very broad view. And getting down into places like that, especially like in Mexico, where, you know, I saw firsthand, the first time in my life, like true poverty, not poverty like we're used to in the U.S., where you go to a small town and there isn't anything but a dirt floor in any building in the town, and kind of getting that opportunity to look back into your own country from outside of it. You learn a lot. There's things that you're very proud about, like, oh, these things about the U.S. that I grew up in that I didn't really appreciate, but you also see the warts kind of in a new way as well, right? And so those were really both just great experiences. But I ended up,
And you chose to do that on your own.
yeah, I really
Something inspired in you said, I need to go, or I want to go do this.
yeah, I really was curious. You know,
Yep.
I'm just kind of curious. Want to learn as much as I possibly can.
So
about
it wasn't
the world.
part of an A&M sponsored
No,
program.
I went and found programs at other universities, you know, that kind of were more tailored. I really wanted to learn the language as well. I loved the Spanish language in high school. My classes there. So I wanted to get reasonably proficient at the language, and had an opportunity to do that. Living with families is obviously a great way to learn the culture. So those were great experiences. While I was also in college, I worked for IBM for 6 months up in New York, lived up in Westchester County, and that was also kind of eye-opening as well. Like I'd never really been outside of Dallas too much. So we'd take the train in every weekend to the city. That's my 21st birthday was my very first time into Manhattan.
No way.
Yeah. And
What year was that?
that was 93.
You there?
I just left.
You just left?
What month?
I was there January through June of 93.
Okay, yeah, I just left.
You did?
I left in 92.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So were you in the city?
Yeah, for 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were a young guy in the city. Had a great time, right?
Yep.
And you remember where you went on your 21st?
Oh, yeah. I remember all the bars that we
awesome.
went to. I know that I woke up the next day and it was dark. And I was like, oh, man, I'm up. And I was like,
Was it dark
I
because-
was like, I'm up early. I was like, no, I looked at my clock. Like it was 5 p.m. the next day. And the sun had gone down.
A young person in New York. You stayed up all night and you slept during the day. There's
what
nothing fun to do during the
Yeah.
day.
That's the thing about New York. I mean, it never sleeps.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You can literally stay out all night
Right,
into the
which-
morning, and
Yeah.
it's fun.
And I also remember that. So in College Station at the time, like you could go out with $15 in your wallet,
Yes.
have an incredible time, and you probably still have $5 left over the next morning. I went out that night in New York with $100 in my wallet, which seems like not a lot in retrospect.
Right.
But maybe in 93 it wasn't terrible.
Now, probably,
And I woke up at 5 p.m. the next day, I look at my wallet, I was like, oh, it's empty. I was like, what did we spend all that money on last night?
Yeah.
that's phenomenal.
So I had a bunch of, great experiences in college, right? I got to live in Utah. I lived in New York. I
Yeah.
lived in Mexico. I lived in Costa Rica.
Was the IBM job like out of A&M, like out of the
That
placement?
was part of the co-op program.
Yeah.
So it was a co-op, they called it.
Okay.
So 6 months, and ended up living with some great guys that remains a close friend. He was number 2 in the FBI until just recently. He was
wow.
He was number 2 to Christopher Wray, and
Wow.
so I got some interesting inside baseball when a lot of stuff, interesting stuff's been
imagine
going on in
so.
the country. Yeah. So yeah, just a great college experience. And,
So was
and-
the IBM job like a technical job, or was it a
No,
finance
it
job?
was a finance job.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, which was an interesting time to be at IBM. They were going through a tough transition at that time. If you may remember back then with Lou Gerstner, and really changing the culture, a bunch
Right.
of downsizing, and interesting time to be there and kind of have a front row seat to some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably saw some panic.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Definitely.
So after there, we're keep us going.
yeah, let's keep going. So
So the IBM deal was a temporary deal, 6 months.
6 month, I think I did that my junior year or something.
Okay, so
like
you're
that.
you're still in school,
Which
hadn't
all these
graduated
things,
yet.
that, living abroad, that all kind of stretched out my college
Yeah.
experience. But I went through.
I feel better about you now. You said it took 5.5 years, but you had some experience.
I was doing some things. Yeah.
Well, and I think
It wasn't like you were powering straight through.
no, exactly, and you weren't sloughing off. I think what's one of the things I pick up already. You said this. You are a curious person. I
Yeah.
mean, you had drive. I think that's obviously one of the critical things in every entrepreneur. I mean, you have to be self-motivated. You were picking, best I can tell, you were driving this whole process. You were picking Utah, you were picking Mexico, you were picking Costa Rica, right?
Yeah.
This is just your desire to be stretched and grow.
Yeah, I think I was reasonably cognizant that I wanted to have a bunch of unique experiences while I was in college, which maybe is even kind of what I talked about with changing my major a few times. I think I graduated with 175 or 180 hours. Like I was close to multiple degrees because I would just go deep on a thing. Like, okay, I'm going to go try another thing deep for a while.
But that's important. That's also how we learn.
That's
and
right.
I hadn't thought much about school being that too. Obviously, your parents or whoever's paying for that, it could be expensive in that sense. But we all know in our 20s, you learn so much by experimentation, saying, okay, I don't like that. I do like, I don't like that. And you were doing that in college.
Where did the freedom come from for you to be able to go do that? Because like for me, it was kind of like 4 years, get in there, get your degree, get out, get a job.
Yeah.
Like it just never felt like there was an
question.
opportunity or a pathway
Yeah.
to go explore.
That's a good question.
Were your parents?
My parents were very helpful and they paid my tuition, which, tuition was very different at a state school back then. So certainly a little more reasonable, but they covered school for me and then I covered everything else. And I worked probably 25, 30 hours a week while I was in college. And I had a great college job. I mean, as when I was in College Station, right? When I was not, off somewhere else. I worked as an IT technician at this research lab on campus. And, it's called the Ocean Drilling Program. There's this, it's funded by all these countries around the world, but there's a ship that Texas A&M has at sea 350 days a year, and it's drilling down to the deepest parts of the sediment, pulling up sediments from the bottom of ocean floors to better understand plate tectonics. And but I just helped kind of keep all the PCs running for all these research scientists, which is a great college job. It paid decently, and the best part about that job is this is back before there was like cloud computing and stuff. Like you had to come in at night and on the weekends and put tapes, on a mainframe and babysit it while it backed up all the work from the researchers of the day. And, get a tape spinning and I'd go sit down in my office and I'd get to study for hours.
While
So it was kind of
while you're getting paid.
getting paid, and so kind of forced study time. And then
Yeah.
that's where I studied. When I wasn't there, I was usually kind of out having a good time. So
awesome.
yeah, good experience there. And that did afford me that opportunity. When it came to studying abroad, I would seek out scholarships and things like that to be able to pay for those things.
Yeah. Did you start to get the kind of the IT tech, bug a little bit in that job at that time, or did that come later?
No, definitely that was early, and that was kind of when the first internet browsers were coming around and email was emerging, and we installed, myself and the other student techs, there were like 4 of us that worked this job. We installed and built out a local area network, which was a totally novel concept at the time, so that everybody in the office is connected. So yeah, that was somewhat informative and for things that I might want to do in the future. Yeah, it was definitely a bug.
Yeah.
It's awesome. All right, so you graduate and kind of take us to some of the early career before you become an entrepreneur.
Yeah, so early career, I went through, like a lot of students, through kind of the career office and interviewed with everybody hiring for finance jobs, and mostly knew I wanted to come back here to Dallas, and had 5 offers coming out, and they were all kind of similar, more or less, but in finance. And so I ended up, my first job was at Price Waterhouse. And I joined Price Waterhouse in their consulting group. And I did both bankruptcy consulting. So, once a company is declared bankruptcy, just kind of going through all that financial analysis where, we'd get hired by lawyers and things like that to come in and do the finance side of things. And I did that for a while. And then one of the partners gave a presentation one day. He was a PhD economist, and he gave kind of a lecture to everybody inside the Dallas office here about securities fraud, Section 10b-5, securities fraud litigation. and how economists could come in and work for attorneys to help them figure out damages in a case like that, which I was really interested. Like I thought his presentation was fascinating. I walked right up to him. And I was like, I want to work for you. I want to learn this. And he's like, okay, come on. And so I did that for a little while, and that was really interesting work. Always hired on the defense side, just to calculate damages when somebody claims fraud and you know, executives running amok or whatever it may be. But I only ended up doing that for a year at Price Waterhouse here in Dallas. Somebody in the office had said, hey, there's a startup in town, and I know the CFO, and he's looking for somebody to come in and help him. And it was a space that I didn't care about. I wasn't interested in. It was a healthcare. You may remember here, especially in Dallas, it was pretty prominent. There were a bunch of roll-ups of different types of physician practices.
Yeah.
And they were rolling up radiology clinics.
Okay.
And I didn't find that particular problem all that interesting. But when I met the CFO, I was like, well, okay, startup, that sounds interesting. I have kind of an entrepreneurial spirit. I wanted to, it's like, I'll at least go take the breakfast. And I met him, and I don't know if you know him. His name's Sammy Abbasi. Sammy's he's in Maverick.
Yeah, I know who he is. I don't know him personally.
Fantastic guy. And becoming a really important mentor to me early in my career. But I knew right away after that breakfast, like I want to work with that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I went off and did that for 5 years. Ended up doing M&A work. Mostly, we were going around trying to find clinics to buy and doing all that analysis. And it was really, we worked hard. Worked a lot. We ended up taking that thing public, and it was almost investment making hours because our finance group was really small, and there were a lot of long hours at the time going on there. 100 hours a week, sleeping in the office the whole weekend, things like that. But I was having such a fun time trying to build something with this group of people.
Were you married at this point?
So I was not yet. I met my wife towards the end of that experience. So I was having that experience where I was, like I said, working really late hours and overnight, and I had this experience where I was ended up having a lot of back pain. I was like, well, I'm probably just sitting in this chair too long, right? And it got to the point where you kind of become not even conscious of it, but my back was hurting enough that when I wasn't sitting at my PC working on whatever model I was working on, I'd be laying on the floor, kind of stretching out my back until it got feeling better. And I remember, Sammy would come by, like, everything was like, no, my back's just hurting a little bit. I'll be fine. And it took months, and I started finally going to doctors, like, what is going on? Like, this is incredibly painful. Like, I cannot figure it out. And I was getting diagnosed with this and that, and none of it was accurate. And this went on for many months. And I finally ended up getting the proper diagnosis, and it was cancer. And it was a big tumor sitting on my spine that had been growing this whole time because I was getting kind of misdiagnosed for such a long time. And and that was total life changer, right? So it was, stage 3C, very advanced, early 98 when I got diagnosed, and you're not sure if you're all right. Well, I think doctor tells you, I think we'll knock this out, but you're not certain.
You're not certain.
How old are you at this point?
I was 26.
Wow.
Holy cow, Patrick.
Yeah. So that was kind of a bit of a life changer in a lot of ways, right? Because I was working really hard, still enjoying that. Very ambitious, very driven to achieve, to succeed. And that's not necessarily gone away, but it's certainly puts everything into a much healthier, more balanced perspective when you go through something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your wife's name is Andrea?
Yeah.
You're dating when you get diagnosed?
Yeah, so that's why I started telling the story. So it ultimately, ironically, the cancer ended up leading me to meet her because I had, I played in beer league softball at the time, right? And
of course.
yeah,
You're 26.
You're working 100 hours a week, but you got to find time for beer league
find a little
softball.
time. Yeah. And so kind of at the end, so the whole treatment process was probably 6 months of really intense chemo, and I lost 50 pounds. And, And at the end of it, I ended up going up to Indiana University, which is where the specialists for this particular type of cancer and the surgeons are. And so I had a really major surgery there at the end, which took me out of beer league softball for quite a while, right? And so instead of playing, I was still just going out to watch my buddies play. You know, I'd sit in the stands and watch my buddies play and then have a beer afterwards with them, hoping to get back on the field when I finally healed up enough. And Andrea, my wife now, she was living beneath two of my buddies in an apartment complex, and she came out to watch those guys play softball one night. And I ended up sitting in the stands next to her.
Now you're having a beer with Andrea while your buddies are playing softball.
Yeah, so I ended up sitting in the stands next to her. And so, right? So a lot of pain to get to that point, of course, but if I'd been in the field, I'd probably never meet her.
Yeah.
Right?
So
Love that.
where do you...
The universe works in mysterious ways.
Yes.
It does. And that's what healthy perspective and a positive outlook, you find the silver lining in every situation. But where are you health-wise? How has that, what are takeaways from all that, Patrick? So give us an update on where you are and all that.
Yeah, no, health's been great, ever since then. No issues on the health side. But it's something that never really leaves your consciousness completely, right? And it could be whatever, any type of kind of facing of your own mortality, whether it's, an accident or disease or whatever it may be. I think that never leaves you. But I think there's very positive, healthy ways to process that. And so it brought a lot more balance back into my life. It certainly made me at that time, okay, I was 26 at the time. Like, it's kind of time I'm working hard. I was playing hard. Like, it's time to be a little more intentional about what I want out of life. Knew I wanted to build a family. And so I was intentional about that as well. I ended up transitioning out of that job. I liked the work, and the people that I work with didn't really care for the industry. So I decided that I wanted to transition out of that. And I wasn't even 100% sure what I wanted to do. So I was comfortable taking a break. And for me, that break meant going to business school. So, not long after I'd kind of been declared healthy, I'd met Andrea. We started dating. That was going great.
Yep.
I could see a path to a life with Andrea that I was excited about. And I started applying to business schools and decided that would be my break. And I would go be curious again, and I would just go figure it out. And applied to a handful of different schools and got accepted to most of them, and I ended up at Harvard Business School. So went up there. Andrea and I got married. So Andrea and I got married about almost 2 years to the date, give or take, from my surgery from cancer. We went off on our honeymoon together. And I flew from Barcelona on our honeymoon straight to Boston, and I started class the next day. She came to Dallas, got all of our stuff, and came up and met me in Boston.
Okay.
Yeah.
How's that experience? What do you take away from that experience?
Which part of the experience? HBS?
Harvard,
Yeah. So, again, probably another very eye-opening experience for me. Coming from small suburb here in Dallas, again, being the first kid to go to college in the family, and my worldview being whatever it was, maybe narrow, came to learn it was narrow. You don't know it's narrow at the time, right?
Well said.
So, like I said, being in Mexico and Costa Rica was eye-opening. Then getting there and meeting people from all over the world and seeing their experience was like, whoa, some of these kids have done a lot, right? I mean, it's
a big world.
It's a big world out there. And it was just incredible, right? Just meeting all of those people. The whole experience was, fantastic. Very, very close friends from there now. I go on golf trips every other year with about a dozen buddies from there that are an important part of my life, an important part of who I am, helped shape me. Some of those friendships that I formed there. The experience, the educational experience, all that's great. But I put a lot more weight and value on the friendships and the relationships I built while I was there. And then did the same, somewhat similar thing that I did as an undergrad. Still was exploring and curious about Latin America, and I took an internship in Uruguay. So my wife and I moved to Montevideo for 3 months in between the 2 years at HBS, and hopefully she was going to learn some Spanish alongside with me, and she didn't.
It didn't come as easy to her.
She insists that everybody would always speak English to her because they realized her
it kind of
Spanish
defeats the
wasn't very
purpose,
good.
honey. It's not really
But it was a great time.
that
to
was
kinda
your
go
dream,
abroad.
not her dream.
It was my dream. That's probably true. I never really thought about that. It's probably true. Yeah.
She was comfortable with English.
She was very comfortable with English. But we had a great time together, yeah.
All right. So you graduate and do you go back into corporate America? Do you start your own company? What happens after Harvard?
At that point, I did know and decide that I wanted to move back into technology. My job in South America is with a startup company, and that kind of reconnected that through line back to my job as an undergrad, and decided I would stick with software and technology. And I ended up meeting some guys here in Dallas through somebody else that had a video game company, and it was based in downtown. It was called Ensemble Studios at the time. An extraordinary, super successful entrepreneur that's so under the radar if you're not in games, and even if you're in games, he's somewhat under the radar, but he might be, one of the top few entrepreneurs in all of Dallas. He's built 4 incredibly successful companies, and I got a chance to meet him and some of the team around him, and they were all just amazing people, and they were making video games, which I played games growing up, and when I worked in that tech lab in college, we'd stick around at night and play games together because we had connected all the computers, right? So we could play multiplayer games. And I just found the industry really fascinating and very dynamic. And I thought, well, this could be, and it was clear it was growing like crazy. And I was like, okay, this is an interesting sail to attach myself to and see where it goes. And now here I am doing this still 20 years later. That company had been acquired a couple of years ago, or a couple of years before this point when I joined, by Microsoft. But they had kept their brand identity here in Dallas. They were still doing their thing. So I got this incredible crash course in learning the industry because I was working for a game developer here in Dallas that was very entrepreneurial with a great founder and a great team. But I also got the exposure to Microsoft and everything that they were doing. They were building the Xbox at the time, and they were growing big into games. So I really got to learn the industry in a very comprehensive way and liked it a lot. Obviously, I've liked it enough to keep doing it for as long as I have. More than anything else, it was the people are just fascinating. The people that choose to do this for a living are off the charts intelligent, off the charts passionate about what they do, and just kind of a joy to be around every day. And that kind of, it's almost this, in some ways, harkens back to those of us that maybe did play sports growing up in that team environment when you come together. And if it's, say it's football, you're on a journey that's a lot of months long, many months long. You're going to start your summer camp with 2-a-days, and maybe you hope it's going to resolve itself in the playoffs in December or January, right? So it's a journey. And video games are somewhat similar. You come together as a team at the beginning, and it may take 2, 3, 4 years that you're going to have to work really hard together and sweat, and there's going to be a lot of doubt, and there's ups and there's downs. But at the end is that release where you get to take your piece of art out to the world, and it has that almost dramatic art to it. It's arc to it that's really that's a difficult but fun process at the same time.
So you joined this group, and you're with them for how long?
Yeah, so we were part of Ensemble Studios after Microsoft had acquired it for 6 years. So, and all those founders, and I wasn't a founder, right? I joined them, but all those founders, for the most part, had stuck around because it still operated with a lot of independence here in Dallas. And as often happens at big companies, a lot of leadership changes, strategy changes. They didn't have, the new leader at the time didn't have a whole lot of use for what we were doing down here in Dallas, and ended up, jettisoning that company. And it ended up being a diaspora of really talented people from that company.
Interesting.
We went off and some of us went and founded Robot. Some other guys founded this company called Bonfire that ended up being successful. Another group of people went off and founded a company called New Toy that made Words with Friends, which, was the Scrabble game, which probably everybody's played. And then we founded Robot, which has still been going now for 15 years. So there was a tremendous amount of talent kind of locked up in that company. And when it went away from Microsoft's perspective,
everybody kind of dispersed.
everybody just dispersed and started doing their own things.
Yeah.
And
So when you graduated from HBS and you joined this group, did you know that you didn't know gaming at that point, or did you?
I only knew it as a consumer.
Yeah.
I ended up coming into that company to help with everything on the business side.
Yeah.
The finance, the marketing.
How did you ultimately get networked to them? Because you were living in Boston,
A friend that I grew up with was working at Microsoft, and he said, "Hey, Microsoft just acquired this game company
in Dallas.
They've got a job posting right now for somebody that does a lot of what you're good at. You ought to go try to meet those guys."
And you had made a decision to come back to Dallas at that point.
Yeah, at that point, my wife was pregnant with the twins, and we had actually were going to move to San Francisco. We had actually gotten an apartment in San Francisco, and I was going to start building a tech career there. And that pregnancy was difficult and challenging, and there were complications and bed rest, and the kids ended up being really premature. And we're like, we just need to get back to family. So let's just head back to Dallas, and we'll just figure it out.
Regroup. Yep.
And that's when I met, these guys.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay, so I want to go so many directions, but let's stay on the path and the thread of Robot. So if you have a comment, observation there, Patrick, as you lead into Robot, it's interesting to me. I don't understand that size of scope. Microsoft buys this company and decides it's essentially useless, I guess, or they take what they want from it, but they distribute out that talent and you go and start Robot. Walk us through that kind of whole phase. Yeah,
it was a really unusual kind of startup and very non-traditional. So when the person in charge of Microsoft at the time decided, and there were other game studios they had at the time that were also kind of leaving. The strategy had shifted a lot, but fine, companies change their strategy, no big deal. But we were working on a pretty big game at the time that we were bringing to market, but we had learned before we had shipped that game that we probably were not going to have a role after the game finished. So it created an opportunity to negotiate the exit, right?
Okay.
And the exit was, okay, we will go and set up Robot Entertainment and take as many people with us as we can. And we ended up getting a contract with Microsoft to make another game for them, but now as an independent entity.
Yep.
And so, and that came in the form of just financing that project. So that gave us all the capital to get started, but it didn't come with any equity. So we got to take about half the people, which was nice, and then most of the other folks found their way to these other two companies, which was also great. And that was off and running, and we did that project for Microsoft for the first.
What year is this? So what year is Robot?
This is 2009.
Okay.
The start. Yep.
Okay.
So we worked on that project for Microsoft for the first, call it 22 months or so. And then when that contract wrapped and we helped them ship that product, we just moved on to our own stuff.
Okay.
And then we've been making our own intellectual property ever since then.
Okay.
Yeah.
So walk us through the video gaming business.
Yeah.
Where's that value? You just mentioned IP. I read that about you. Yeah, walk us through video game entertainment. What are the principles of it?
So I think video game development is about as dynamic as it can possibly get in any industry. It changes so fast, reinvents itself every few years. The opportunities when they come are enormous, and then they can shift really quickly. It's just a very, very fast-moving field that's at the forefront of both technology and art.
Yeah, it really is.
Simultaneously. And so
a little bit of pop culture in there too, right?
Yeah,
sure.
Like you think about, look at what NVIDIA is today, right? NVIDIA is the most valuable company in the world. NVIDIA's bread and butter, long before they were into AI, were graphic chips. The games were pushing, the edge of what these chips were capable of. And they were incredibly good at that. So we're right out there on the leading edge with where the hardware is kind of powering, real-time rendering. And that's kind of led NVIDIA into doing different things that they've turned out to do. So it's just right there. And it's the same thing on art as well. So you have this really unique, incredible mix of personalities and talent that come together under one roof to make a game. So you have three distinct disciplines in game. You have your engineers, your programmers, who are, incredibly bright, the best and the brightest make this way into this field. And it's not necessarily because it's where they can go make the most money. They could go work for Google or Facebook or Apple and earn more typically, but they love the product and that's what they want to make.
They're passionate. This is very passionate with talent.
Yeah. And then you, at the same time, under the same roof, you have artists, which are completely distinct personality types from programmers. But artists that are doing everything from animation to the modeling to the concepting of the art, the visual effects. And then you have the game designers that are, writing your stories, creating your levels. And then sometimes you might have we have a sound and music person inside the studio as well. So it's this incredible mix of people that come together to jointly make these products. And that's a lot of the joy and the fun of it. And it's very long-lived, right? It's not dissimilar to how a movie is made, except it's, more nuanced in the types of talent that you need. And then the cycles are just so much longer. And the capital investment in games is so significant. And you have to make that investment over such a long period of time before you have an opportunity for the return. And the return is incredibly uncertain, right? It's very hit-driven. It's often binary. It's
exactly.
You can have a smash hit. You
Home
can have
run or strikeout.
Absolute failure. And when you're independent, if you're not the big company like a Microsoft or an Electronic Arts or whatever it is, when you're in an independent game studio working on one or maybe two games at a time, it takes a certain amount of a gambler's mentality to kind of come in and feel your way into that, to be comfortable enough to make the bet and hope there's that pot of gold at the end of it.
So how many games are you working on right now, as an example, or maybe over the last 15 years, how many different games have you worked on?
I think over 15 years we've shipped 8 or 9 games, so it's not a lot, right? But we staggered them. There's different. We've been as big as 120 people. We've been as small as 20 people, and it can flex up and flex down, which is can be a challenging and unfortunate part of the business.
Yeah. How big are y'all today?
We're about 30 full-timers, but there's these days it's a lot easier to kind of flex your team without having to grow your full-time staff and not get into those situations where, well, the game ends, ships and it didn't quite perform, and now we need to lay off people. And we've been there before, and it's incredibly painful. And I hope I don't have to ever go back through that again. But technology's changed in such a way that games are digitally distributed. Of course, when I started, it was you put a box, you put a game on a disc in a box, and you put it in Best Buy or GameStop or wherever, and now it's all bits being downloaded straight to your phone or your PC. Then you take that, and then just the connectedness of the global economy, right? And the tools that we have to communicate with one another, whether that's Zoom or Slack or Teams, whatever it may be, we can now connect with talent around the world. So we can, what I was going to say about the game, there may be 100 people that work on this game that we're working on, but only 30 of them are full-timers.
It's more of a freelance. The environment is way more for freelance now, and you contract them for 90 days or a game. There's so many questions. I love this. You are so much at the tip of the spear, Patrick. I think your analogy is so good. A couple of things I want to you all are launching a game in January, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Can we talk about that?
Sure.
Okay, go. What is the game? What's the story?
Yeah.
What's going on?
So the interesting thing about games in any kind of creative medium, of course, intellectual property is incredibly valuable, right? If you get an IP that has some kind of value and fans like it, and you have a community attached to it that wants to follow it, then it can be a thing that supports and sustains a smaller game studio like ours. And so we have a game franchise that the first game we made after the contract with Microsoft ended, back in 2011, we shipped a game called Orcs Must Die. And it's this cheeky, kind of humorous, doesn't take itself too seriously, bunch of goofy orcs coming at you and your friends, and you're trying to figure out how to fend them off. And we did this genre blend up of a couple of different genres. One's called tower defense, one called third-person shooter. And we blended them in a way at the time that was pretty unique. And that's gone on to be successful enough that we can make sequels of that. And so we're working on a new entry right now in the franchise called Orcs Must Die Death Trap that is hopefully being responsive to what our fans have been asking for over the years. And we listen very, very closely to what our customers are asking for. We're observing how they're playing our games. And then we try to meet them where they're asking for novelty and innovation. And so hopefully we're threading that needle now, and that's coming out in June.
How are you listening? Go ahead.
How many people are playing that game? The original Orcs Must Die.
Yeah, so
just as it,
Yeah, Orcs
because
Must
he's
Die.
downloading it tonight.
Yeah.
He's
Sorry, I'm just trying to frame up.
Orcs Must Die 2 is our biggest one. Orcs Must Die 3 is probably similar. It will get there over time. It's just Orcs Must Die 2 has been on the market longer. It's been sold about 3 million copies, and across the whole franchise, there's been 4 games, and we've reached around 11 or 12 million players.
And then is it in one-time download, annual subscription, pay to play, buy tokens or whatever?
We've tried different.
I sound like I know what I'm talking about.
You hit them all, so just keep throwing out. Yeah.
Bitcoin's the only one you got there, kind of a tokens.
We've tried different business models over the year, and that's the other thing that's very dynamic about the industry is the business models shift and change. Used to be you'd pay $60 at the store and you'd take it home and insert your disc, and now there's free to play and there's subscriptions and there's microtransactions and there's whatever it may be. And so we've tried different things. Right now, this game will be a paid game. You'll pay us $30 to download the game, and then we will keep making additional content after that. And we'll package that up in different ways and sell it for smaller price points. So maybe it's $7, $10, whatever. Some of that'll be cosmetic stuff to dress up your characters. Maybe it's new heroes, whatever it may be. There's usually some way for us. Hopefully, if we can keep our players enjoying the experience and that we're supporting and pushing the new content and delivering value to them, they'll be willing to pay us for what we deliver.
Is your distribution direct, or are you through a third? I mean, because this feels like the publishing world, the movie world. Distribution feels like king.
Yeah.
Do you agree, disagree?
Yes. Distribution's critical. And so in games, there's development and then there's publishing. We're doing both. So we're developing and we're self-publishing. And then our distribution medium is through different platforms. So there's, on the console side, you have Xbox.
Okay.
And you have Sony PlayStation. And we distribute through those. They're not our publisher.
But you're going direct to them.
Yeah, so we have to work through them, through Sony and Microsoft, but then we're putting the bits up on the store. We have to market it ourselves. Hopefully we get some support from them to help market to their big audiences, and then players can go out and buy it.
So how do you decide, like in the beginning, okay, we're going to go do version 4 of Orcs Must Die or whatever. How do you decide, one, like how much are we going to spend? How much risk are we going to take? How are we going to finance this? Or if it's a new game, start from scratch, nobody's ever heard of.
Yeah.
Like, how do you determine how to make that investment? And then are you raising capital, or are you funding it through operations?
Yeah.
And as you have success with prior games, you're squirreling away capital so that you can invest in just give us a little sense for that.
Yeah, no, great question. It's an art and a science at the beginning, right? Because it's incredibly difficult to kind of forecast, how a game will perform. Certainly if it's a new IP, if it's a brand new IP, it's never been seen, that creates and carries a certain level of risk that maybe doesn't exist with doing a sequel. And so SQL gives you a little bit more insight into how you might
You
perform.
got track record.
Yeah. And then you're just, it's such a long stretch. So the way we start at the beginning, Scott, is for this game, we started this game in January of 23. We started kind of putting the paperwork together, the concept, like, okay, and it may start with one page, like this game is this.
Yep.
Here's our vision. Here's the audience we're going for. And then, okay, we like that. Then we sit down with the production team, who we have incredibly talented producers who've been doing this for so long. They can kind of spend time with the creatives on the team and like, all right, let's scope this out. Let's put our heads around what this looks like. And then we can start to build a schedule. We need this many people at this time, and it's going to take us this many months. And we know our average cost per person is this, and we can come up with what the estimated budget is going to be. And then we get to work on the forecasting side. Like, okay, can we earn that back? How long is it going to take us to earn that back? How will we earn that back? What are the scenarios? A bunch of scenario modeling on the downside and the upside. And then we try to build a business case that we feel good about. And then it's trying to figure out how to finance it. And games are really capital intensive because the people are expensive, right? And that can take a lot of different forms, but almost all game developers need to find financing in some way or another. Some are able to maybe have a successful evergreen IP that funds all their other, ambitions. We often have to go and find external capital for our games. So for this one, we are funding it a portion out of our own capital. We also raised a little bit of capital from existing investors, which I'd be happy to talk about. Maybe an interesting story there about one of our investors. And then we'll look for other opportunities. So you can go, for example, we went to Microsoft, and Microsoft has a subscription platform called Game Pass. And if they take your game into that, they're going to give it away to all their subscribers. Well, they'll pay you up front for that.
It's Netflix.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the Netflix model. So we got some money from Game Pass as well. And we got some money from another platform. So we will literally go out there, and I'll spend a long time and a tremendous amount of effort. I mean, it's one of my key roles in my job is finding the capital to go finance this incredible talent to go make the next game. And I just piece it together and just really piece it together in as many ways as possible.
Can you give us an idea what the total capital investment for this version is?
Not for this one just now,
but
our games range. So I can give you a range. The first Orcs Must Die game, this was a longer time ago, a little cheaper. So that was probably a $3 million project.
Okay.
But back at Microsoft, the last game that we worked on there was a big console game. That was probably $35 million.
Okay, wow.
So the range is pretty wide. But there's games that cost $500 million. Right? You take a Grand Theft Auto or a Call of Duty, you're getting well into the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's just the development. And the marketing might almost match that.
Correct. Yeah. These are the blockbusters. Yeah. And the sequels. Man, if it's interesting enough for you to refer to it, Patrick, tell us about the investor story.
Yeah. So Scott asked the question about how we finance a game. So the biggest game we've ever made at Robot Entertainment was an Orcs Must Die kind of spinoff called Orcs Must Die Unchained. And that was going to be much more, that was by far the most expensive game we've made, and we spent too much on it. Probably chased it for longer than we should have. But we put together a strategy that we were going to try to syndicate the financing like a movie. So a movie might sometimes go and get some money from some distributors in Europe and some distributors in Asia, and maybe somebody down in Australia, and everybody will chip in, and that's how it gets syndicated. So we syndicated it in that way, and we picked up some money from Russia, and we picked up some money from Western Europe, and we went to Asia and met with everybody there. And that ended up, we didn't intentionally go seeking this. We were seeking financing for the game, but we met Tencent, which is, if you know Tencent's one of the biggest technology companies in the world, based in Shenzhen, China, and has gone on to have tremendous success, become one of the biggest players in games. But they're not just games. I mean, games is a significant part of their business, but they have their messaging platforms and social media platforms and advertising business and search, everything. And we met them, and they asked us if we were interested in taking an equity investment. At that point, we had never taken an equity investment. And really interesting, right? Having a conversation with a Chinese investor.
Yep.
I had, at that point, had never been to China, and I've spent a lot of time since then. But really interesting, a lot of learning for me, right? Raising equity capital is its own kind of educational experience, and a whole bunch you go through there, but also doing it with pretty unique cultural takes and differences. And they've first invested in the business in 2015, and they've gone on to be a really incredible partner to us. And they ended up putting in a little bit of capital last summer as well when we needed some financing for this game. And that was after they invested a lot in that game that they were very, very bullish about. They felt like we were going into a blue ocean. And they convinced us that we were making the right game.
Interesting.
Well, they confirmed our own hopes,
Right.
I should say, that we were going into this blue ocean. Turns out by the time we got to that ocean, it was really red.
Yep.
And that investment didn't work out yet for them. And it could be very easy, I think, for almost any investor out there would. When I went back to them last year and said, look, we're going to need a little more capital, and kind of some of these terms from our old investment back in 2015 are kind of putting some handcuffs on us, and we need to maybe think about making some changes. Most investors would, get out of here. We've already given you money, don't come back, or worse. And they've been incredibly supportive the whole time. And I've learned a lot about that dynamic, and I don't know if it's unique to them or if it's, so there's something here culturally that I'm still learning about. There's this idea, I think, in China that you've probably heard if you've done any business there, that saving face is really important. And what I've learned with this investor group is if your actions match your words, they respect it. They don't forget it.
Yeah.
And if you ever play any games of deceit or
hide the ball,
trying to play the upper hand, they won't forget that either. And we've always respected that relationship and been as transparent as we possibly could be with them. And they've rewarded us by being a very flexible and supportive investor.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, so I got a couple more questions.
Yeah, so do I.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about valuation. Like, how do you value a business? Obviously, there's IP.
Yeah.
And there's subscriptions and there's ongoing revenue for the model. But how do you think about valuing the business? And then how do you personally think about, you're 15 years in, and at some point, is there an exit in the future?
Yeah.
You're going to do this, for the next 20 years. Is your son going to come join? Is it going to be a family legacy type asset? How are you thinking about the business from a kind of long-term perspective?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question as well, and it's a layered answer because it's changed over time. When we took that investment from Tencent in 2015, we took it at a very lofty valuation that wasn't supported by anything fundamental wise, right? And that can often be the case in any industry like technology or creative industry like this. If you're out there kind of out front of some big wave that's coming, and there's a lot of excitement in the product that you're building, a valuation can kind of explode without a lot of fundamental analysis behind it. And there was a lot of pent up energy in what we were making at the time. The valuation reflected that. And so what's challenging about what we do is if that product then doesn't meet those expectations, then the valuation does this. And now you're on the next cycle of the next game, maybe 3 years away again.
Right.
So you may stay in this depressed valuation state
for
until that next game. And it's very much it's such a different business. So being in YPO and talking about other entrepreneurs and founders and friends that I know and how they build their business, like, this kind of
every year.
It's a little more linear.
Like, if I showed you my EBITDA over the years, you'd be like, how do you sleep at night?
It's a roller coaster.
Yeah. So it's very much a roller coaster. And so sometimes it depends on the cycle of the industry, what's happening. So if you were making a mobile game not long after the iPhone came out and you were making a hit mobile game, valuation kind of off the charts. The guys here locally that made Words with Friends sold that company for a tremendous amount of money because they were right there at the right time with the right product.
Right.
We've come close over the years and we've had conversations about selling. Sometimes those things aren't completely in your control.
Right.
We've had certain complications in selling the business because a lot has changed between China and the U.S. and the relationship there. CFIUS, if you know what the Chinese Foreign Investment Act, has complicated things that Chinese companies can't buy U.S. companies, and we have a Chinese investor, and that ended up being a block to something we were looking at a couple of years ago. And so not everything's always in your control. Our industry consolidated dramatically between 2019 and through 2021. COVID really accelerated that because it was an industry that was doing incredibly well because people were at home, and valuations became ridiculous. There was one particular company in Sweden that was overpaying for everything, which drove valuations. They were playing a public market arbitrage game. We're trading at 30x EBITDA. I'll pay you 15x. At some point, that music stops playing.
Right.
The music stopped playing, and the industry's been in the toughest spot that I've seen it now for the last couple of years. Layoffs have been substantial across the whole industry. It was overinvested in. Public market valuations plummeted. When that happens, private market valuations go with it. And we're just kind of in this doldrum right now where valuations are depressed and there aren't that many buyers because most of the buyers are still shedding people and shedding projects. And so it's this tough moment. So I think the best thing we can do when you're in this moment in time is just put our heads down and run the business. We can't control that. We need to let the macro side of the industry go where it's going to go and build the healthiest, best company, best
kind of
culture,
be ready,
best products we can make. And when and if that time comes, we'll be prepared, but we're not going to chase it.
Yeah. It's a good answer. One follow-up question on that. So you've obviously got the franchise with the Orcs game, and then is there this sort of incubator kind of going on in the background where you're like, okay, we know we have this franchise. There's some predictability around the franchise. It's a lower risk, every time we roll out the next version of this franchise, but we're gonna experiment over here with something that's totally different, totally new, higher risk profile. Is that kind of the dynamic that you guys?
Absolutely. Yeah. So as we talked about, intellectual property is the most valuable thing under our roof, besides the people, I should say. And if you're an independent developer, the developers I admire the most have multiple successful IPs under their roof. And we have another one that's smaller that did pretty well, but didn't become something we could continue on. But we're always thinking about how we can make that next thing. So when you get to the tail end of a game like this one and we're shipping it in January, we hope to support it for a while, but we already have a small group thinking about what's next.
Correct.
And that's usually very much informed by what you just made, right? Because you've built a lot of technology, you've built a lot of art, whatever. You learned a lot of lessons making that new thing that hopefully informed this thing. And the other thing that's happened in our industry is we have kind of a bit of an Econ 101 problem. There's a ton of supply and demand is kind of flattened. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about, okay, where are there gaps out there in the market for an experience? We think about the players, like what is the experience they could have that doesn't exist for them on the market now, and could we go and fulfill that gap? And so we're in those conversations and discussions now. And then even once you get to that point, you have to prototype it. So once we get an idea, paper's not good enough to make you believe that you have something that can be commercially successful. You have to go through a phase where you make something small, prototype, to prove out those concepts, and only then can you start to move forward and start to invest and again go through that cycle, figure out how to finance it, and
you probably got to put an MVP for all these things to take to market. This is so fascinating, Patrick, because I keep going back to it brings technology, entertainment, pop culture. What is most in demand right now from the business? Is it the storyteller? Is it the designer? What is the most coveted talent need right now?
Yeah, that's a good question too. It's typically Right now, unfortunately there's a tremendous amount of supply of talented people that can't find work because of all the layoffs.
Yeah,
If
interesting.
you go back to say during the pandemic early days, 2020, 2021, we were having a hard time competing with the big tech companies. Like, we'd have a junior engineer, 24 years old, making 120 grand. Not bad coming a year or two out of school. Google comes in and offered him 250.
Wow.
Like, oh my gosh. Like, it was really hard for game companies to keep talent for a while. Now there's a lot of talent available, which is unfortunate for a lot of people in the industry. But
And it's an opportunity if you have cash.
if you have cash, exactly. But engineers kind of make it all go. Like, just finding talented, very talented engineers that want to do this with passion is probably always going to be the driver. That's not at all to diminish the importance of designers and artists, because they're just as critical. But engineers are always a bit of the tip of the spear.
Okay.
How do you think about just going back to the valuation and an exit and kind of that thread of the conversation? How do you personally think about planning? So we talk a lot about there's running the business and all the things you have to do for the business, but then there's this whole sort of personal side from a financial perspective. How do you get ready for that exit or that monetization event that you really actually don't know when it's going to happen, because it's an opportunistic kind of thing. So how do you think about that?
That's a tough one, because they can be so disconnected in time.
Right.
That's not always in your control, right? I think I adopt the mentality that the best thing I can do is stay focused on the people in my company and the business that we're trying to build. And if we're making the best decisions and empowering our people to go and make the best games possible, that time will come.
Yeah.
That makes planning hard.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a hope and pray, but hopefully we're doing decently well along the way, and we're rewarding our people well, and people are compensated appropriately for the work that they're doing. And but hopefully for one day, we're big about sharing equity in our company. I want that success for everybody. I'm just as motivated by their ultimate success as I am by my own. So hopefully we're all rowing the boat in the same direction, and that takes care of itself.
Yeah.
What keeps you up at night?
Not much these days.
Okay.
Not much these days keeps
positive.
me up. There was when the industry was going through a tough time a couple of years ago, and we were scraping for capital for this next game, there was a lot that kept me up. But I've learned to process that better. I've worked through a lot of that stress and that challenge, and we got the company to a better place, so that naturally just takes care of itself in some ways. But it's also just a lot of I feel like I'm still learning. I'm still growing, learning more about myself. I feel like I've grown more in the last year than I ever have in my life, and that helps me in ways where there isn't a lot that keeps me up at night. I don't allow the things that used to keep me up at night. I don't allow those things to keep me up at night any longer.
How do you think you got there?
A lot of hard work. I've done a lot of hard work over the last year and a half, 2 years. We talked before we came on about going through Stegan's program and Dragon's Gap. I ended up being matched with this incredible group of people in my small scouting party, where we're all really leaning in and learning how we relate with ourselves, to know ourselves better, how we relate with others. And I've learned so much from them and from this process that has been very, very healthy for me.
Patrick, I could keep you here for way longer than you want to be here. Your demeanor, your story, your transparency, it's contagious. It's attractive. Thank you very, very much for telling your story. Super glad that you and Andrea beat cancer and that you're sitting here right now. And so thanks for being with us on Decision Points.
Yeah, thank you for those kind words. I appreciated the conversation.